C5 Insight is a Microsoft partner that plans, builds, and supports solutions in Dynamics 365, Teams, SharePoint, and the Power Platform. Contact us to modernize your business today.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Copilot for Sales Bootcamp and Roundtable. My name's Haley, and I'll be your webinar moderator. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This bootcamp is 15 minutes of concentrated content, but we really encourage participants to stay after the presentation for a roundtable discussion with Prachi from Microsoft and our C5 team. We welcome your questions throughout the presentation. You can use the Q&A icon at the top of your screen, and we'll get to those during that roundtable at the end. Finally, if you'd like a copy of our slides with hot links to our mini demos that Jeff will be sharing, we're happy to get them over to you. We have a slide at the end with our emails on it, and you can touch base with us there. Over to you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Haley, and welcome, everybody. So yes, welcome to part 7 of 8 of this series on Copilot for Sales. Thank you again for joining us, wherever you're joining us from. So today we're kind of doing, we're almost bringing all the pieces together. In the series, we focused on a lot of the features, and we've covered most of them already. So today I want to talk about Cadence. So I've pulled this content together because I talked to our own sellers and looked at my own agenda and kind of said, how are we weaving this into the fabric of what we're doing every day? And since we do a lot of training on this too, I can tell you that when we work with a lot of our client sellers, this whole idea of a sales cadence is really, really important. And while it might be a bigger picture than this, when you get tactical, really the best proactive sellers are folks who have a weekly cadence where they spend time every week reflecting on the past week, planning for the coming week, a daily cadence where they're getting ready for just the meetings of the day, and then the real-time cadence, right? It's sort of like, so what am I doing now in the moment? I'm executing that task. I'm having that meeting. I'm sending that email. So that's what I wanted to do today. I wanted to talk about these 3 cadences. And by the way, another way of thinking about this is a principle that we call the powered by luck principle. And that is, hey, on a weekly, daily, and real-time basis, what am I doing to listen to and understand myself, my business, my customers and prospects? How am I listening to my last week and preparing for my next week? And then how do I connect, right? Now that I've listened and understood, how do I plan to take action? How do I use that knowledge to improve what I'm doing, either strategically in my weekly plan or in the very moment in my real time? And always, how do I know how I did? What are my KPIs? Because I want to keep improving. So that's the luck principle. So what we're going to be talking about is how you can apply this with Copilot in your weekly, daily, and real-time cadence. So first thing I want to talk about real quickly is we in our cadence actually use something called Teams updates to remind all of ourselves, including myself, what we need to do each week in our cadence. So each of us gets this little pop-up once a week saying, hey, remember to check in and do your weekly cadence. Now I'm going to work through a few of the steps in here. The very first thing on here that we get reminded to do is be good at activity management. So it basically reminds me, hey, use Copilot. Track your meetings from last week in Copilot. If you haven't already, you should have, but sometimes some slip. And be prepared for the coming week by tracking your meetings in Copilot for the coming week, so it's there and ready in the moment. So hopefully you know how to do that. We already did some of that in some of the preceding ones, but sometimes you've already sent that meeting in Copilot, and then you want to track it before the meeting starts. And if you're like me and you're using the new Outlook, you might be like, well, wait a minute, maybe that's sending a second message. How do I make sure I don't do that? So let's take a quick look at a pro tip for how to track your meeting if you've already sent the invitation. The best time to track a meeting is right when I create it and before I send it. But sometimes I forget, and I need to track it later after the invitation has already been sent. The process is similar. I open the appointment, select Copilot for Sales, choose to save it, select which record to connect it to, and click Save. But now, when I try to close this activity, Outlook asks if I want to click OK to discard it or cancel. If I cancel, I go back to editing my record. And the only way to save it is to send it. And that's going to send the customer a confusing second invitation to the same meeting. Here's the trick. click OK to discard. As you can see, the meeting is still tracked, but the second invitation was never sent. And you can still see that when I open the appointment and have a look. All right, so super simple tip there, but if you're using this daily like I am, sometimes those things can easily slip right by you and you're not quite sure which is a magic button to click. So now working through activities a little bit more, and by the way, we are very all about activity management at C5 Insight. We think activity management and dynamics is actually not the way to just track what you've done, but the way to be proactive, to be on top of the things that are coming in the future. So one of the things we're very focused on is, are you setting those activities to complete? Because when you do that, it's actually a reminder each week to go, hey, I had that meeting last week, but have I planned for the follow-up well? So when you're going through that activity process, there might be some things you look at and you're like, wait a minute, what was that meeting all about? Or how do I summarize that and get that to the customer efficiently? Let's look at a couple of scenarios where you can use Copilot to help you with that process. I'm reviewing my meetings from last week in Dynamics that haven't yet been set to complete. Here I can see a meeting with a prospect. I can't remember exactly what happened in this meeting, so I'm going to ask Copilot for some help. I'll Alt-Tab over to Teams. Then I'll open Copilot for Sales, open the meeting summary, and on Recap, I can see notes and follow-up tasks. If I needed more information from Copilot, I could click the link and ask questions about the meeting. But in this case, I'm just going to copy the notes. Back in Dynamics, I can add the note to the record and paste the meeting notes right into it. With the notes available, I also remember I had an action item to send the slide deck for this meeting and my contact information. I can click to send a new email from within Dynamics to take care of that right now. And from here, if I wanted, I could activate Copilot to help me draft the email. One more thing. I always create a follow-up activity for anyone I want to stay in touch with before I close out the open activity. So after I send the email, I create this task to remember to reach out if this prospect doesn't respond back to me. And now I can set the meeting to complete knowing that this prospect remains on my to-do list to stay engaged with. All right, so another scenario here, and this is one that actually happened just a couple of days ago. I'd met with someone the preceding week, great meeting. She'd said, can you send me a recap of the meeting? I need to go to the decision makers and talk to them about the options you gave me. How could I do that super quickly with Copilot? Well, it makes it super easy. Let's take a look. An important contact has asked me to follow up with her after a meeting. We discussed some options for working together, and she wanted to get a summary of those to share with other stakeholders. I've started the email in Outlook, and I choose Copilot for Sales. Then I ask for help drafting an email. Copilot suggests summarizing recent meetings, which I accept and select the meeting. Copilot starts a summary of the meeting as a draft. I accept it and use this as a quick starting point, adding more details and links to other resources available on our SharePoint portal that she can download. So that was super cool. Now, in reality, it was a starting point for me. She had said, I want these 3 options identified, and I want some pricing and stuff like that. So I had to add a little bit to that email, but it was super nice at kind of giving me the draft and the structure for the meeting. And then I went in and took about 2 or 3 minutes to just add a few other things in there to give her some context. Probably cut 15, 20 minutes out of my day just by Copilot drafting that a meeting summary for me. It had all the knowledge about the meeting, and it knew just what I needed to put in there. So a couple of other thoughts on weekly, and then we'll jump into the daily plan. So this one I don't have a video for, but the next thing we also do in our weekly cadence is we say, hey, you've thought about your past activities, you've thought about your future activities, you've structured those, but now look at your pipeline, right? What's going on with your opportunities? What's going on with your leads? Make sure that nothing is slipping through the cracks, right? Plan follow-up meetings. One nice thing about Copilot directly in Dynamics is as I navigate around to those records, Copilot, if I have it open in the sidecar, is automatically telling me about those, right? I can ask it for more information about them, but it also automatically says, oh, you're on this opportunity. Here's some information on it. So that gives you a little bit of a top level weekly review of what's going on. And one really cool thing that I noticed recently is when I'm on a lead, Copilot will even look at that lead and go, hey, these look like other records that might actually be connected to that lead. It's not always right, but you can choose, yes, that one is connected. Go ahead and connect it for me so I can see more rich information about this entire relationship if there's already a, for example, contact in your system about that lead. So now getting down a little more tactical, right? We've thought about the week, but now it's time to think about the day. Now, for me, this is the beginning of each day. Some people who are a little more proactive than me actually do this at the end of the day for the upcoming day. Wherever it fits in your cadence, you can use some of these tools. Now, the scary thing for me is this is an actual day out of my calendar, right? So some of you sellers have days like this. I come back from an event and it is like I am bouncing from one meeting to another very quickly. And while I try to take time at the beginning of the day to be prepared for all of my meetings, even when I do that, by the time I'm hitting one meeting after another, sometimes it's like I've barely had time to say thank you and hang up before I've got to be in the next meeting or I'm late and I want to be prepared for that meeting. So before the day, I track all my meetings, of course, but I prepare for each meeting as well, and I always want to record them. So let me give you a couple of tips and insights into how to do some of those things. It's the beginning of the day, and I have a number of meetings I know that are coming up for the day. I'm going to turn to Copilot to help me get ready. I could type into the prompt, or I could choose one of the suggested prompts. By clicking Prepare for Sales Appointments, I can immediately see a number of appointments I have coming up within the next 24 hours. To get more information, I can hover over an appointment and click Prepare. Copilot looks at the record inside of Dynamics and looks at other information such as email history and gives me a quick update so I can be ready for my meeting. So one nice little feature there. Now, truth be told, for me, a lot of my meetings are strategic and I've prepared hours in advance and I have a OneNote page with lots of notes on it. But that's all very individualized. Sometimes they happen quickly and I can at least jump into CRM and get a little bit of quick information about it. Now, one thing that happens sometimes is I forget to record meetings. So let's look at a quick tip on how to make sure that happens. My weekly and daily routine mean I've always tracked my meetings in Copilot prior to the time that they start. But when jumping from one meeting to another, it can be challenging to remember to record the meeting. Here's a way to remember it once at the beginning of each day and let Teams and Copilot do all the work. Here's a meeting I have later today. As you can see, it's already tracked in Copilot. I scroll to the area where the link to join the meeting is, and below that, I click Meeting Options. Then I scroll to the bottom where it says Recording and Transcript and turn the option on. Repeating this option for all my meetings means they'll automatically record, capture the transcript, and allow me to engage with Copilot during and after the meeting. Now, I believe your administrator can turn that on for all meetings for everybody, but of course, you might not want to go that far. So this is kind of a nice compromise. We've done a lot on preparing for meetings. We did a whole session on that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. That dimmed link there, if you get the slides, that's a link to a video on YouTube. You can just search our YouTube videos to bring that one up too, if you want to dive deeper into how to be prepared for your meetings. Now, one thing I noticed literally this morning, I was getting ready for another demo, and I noticed that right above the timeline, there's a new feature that said Copilot. And when I clicked it, it turned into highlights, and it's combed through my entire timeline for that account and gave me some bullet point information about that. I don't know about you guys, but I can't count how many times I've had a long list of activities and I'm kind of fishing around and I'm trying to get my head around what's going on with an account or an opportunity before I engage. This way I can get some quick top of mind things identified that really saves me some time in being prepared to have a conversation. Okay, and then rounding this out, this idea of, well, now we're in real time, we're in the moment. So what can I do to execute better? And really that's across three different areas, and I'm going to go through these and just talk about them and not play the videos because we're almost out of our 15 minutes. But I'll tell you about them, and if you want them, hit us up for the slides. The slides will have the short videos embedded directly into them. So the first one is the execution of your meetings, right? We did a whole session on that. That's on YouTube too. That's a dimmed clip right there. But one really cool thing you can do in the meeting is Copilot can support you, not just in taking notes for after the meeting, but even in helping you engage better in the meeting. That's an awesome video there where it shows how you can say, who's in this meeting and what are some important sales questions I should ask to this important decision maker? And it can give you intelligence right in the moment to help you be better engaged. That's a great video, and we spent a lot of time creating it. So please ask for the slides because we'd love to put that in your hands. Also, email. So we sent a whole session on creating emails with Copilot. You can go check that one out, but there's lots you can do with your emails in the moment to make sure you're executing well on your emails, including not only summarizing them, but drafting them. And then also creating and collaborating on documents. So a real life case study here, actually, I was collaborating with a couple of coworkers on an RFP last week, over the weekend, and in the beginning of this week. There were so many things going on with edits going on with that I was like, I don't remember who's doing what on this. So I went into Teams to the thread where we were talking about it, popped out Copilot and said, what's going on with this? And it gave me a quick update. As you can see right here, this is an actual production instance of us doing this. I was able to, for the executive summary PowerPoint, create some slides by bringing some content in and get some really good ideas for putting that together quickly. And then I was using Copilot bit by bit on all this very verbose RFP text, helping it to build it for me. One thing I did was I went out to LinkedIn, I got a company description, and I pasted it in and said, put this in the bullet points, because we always like to summarize an understanding of our client company at the beginning of an RFP response. Another thing I did was I pointed back to that PowerPoint and said, hey, will you grab this section from that PowerPoint and put this into the situation assessment inside the RFP for me, so it will summarize that for me and I can just start editing it from there. So I am going to play this last video for you. This is a vision of things to come with Copilot. This release is a couple of months away, but I find this one incredibly exciting, and it's a great way of rounding out this idea of being proactive and being data-driven in our selling. All right. So I found that super exciting because when we talk about this whole cadence thing, this idea of going from I have my cadence and it's my Copilot helping me do those things I do in my cadence to actually saying, I'm actually going to help you determine the best cadence. Like, what should I do this week? Here are the people you should probably talk to this week. What an incredibly time-saving and powerful capability that will be when it's available. So wanted to end on that little vision of the future, because what we can do now is exciting. It just keeps getting better.
Struggling to leverage Microsoft Enterprise solutions? At C5 Insight, we understand the intersection between technology, business, and people. Contact us to learn more.
All right. So if you are not hanging around for the roundtable, we get it. You're busy. You've got a lot to do, but we do encourage you to jot down our emails if you found this session valuable and want a copy of the slides. We are not gatekeeping. We are happy to give it to you. So just send us a note. The first question that comes to mind when we're talking about cadences and making the most out of your day, especially for sellers who are probably the busiest, doing one thing to the next, like your calendar was wild. to see like one thing after another. I think that user adoption is often a pain point for organizations. So like this all sounds really good and helpful, and I want to be doing these things, and I want my people to be doing these things. But do you have advice for organizations that are struggling with user adoption or don't quite know how to approach it with their sellers?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I have noticed in almost most of my customer conversations that a lot of organizations that struggle with user adoption, they feel it's hard to get their day-to-day users to start using Copilot. And to that, my biggest advice would be just to, like Jeff showed you, how easy it is to record meetings. When you are able to be finishing your meeting, you don't even have to worry about taking notes. So that's one great way, recording meetings and getting those AI notes without even having to do anything. And another one is writing emails. So we had a dedicated session on how to write emails with Copilot assistance. And that's just a great way to adopt it because you'll notice the Copilot icon is going to light up everywhere. So it really makes it easy for you to adopt it the more you use it. So that's my biggest advice. Don't be afraid to play around with it because I know originally I was like, this is kind of stressful. Let me exit out. And then because it popped up so often, I was like, you know what? Let me start adopting it myself. And it becomes like clockwork and it's really going to help you. So
We'll say too, I think on the adoption piece of it, we've seen so many times that adoption isn't as high as somebody might like it to be simply because of like a lack of knowledge around what it is, what that does. So very happy that so many of you have come along this journey over the past few weeks with us as we've kind of tackled a lot of the unease and using the tools that you aren't as familiar with. But think of that when it comes to the people on your teams that might be struggling with adopting the newer products. If you haven't, maybe get them to watch the YouTube videos that Jeff had mentioned throughout this of some of the past sessions, or just to once again bring some attention to some of those different things that were highlighted in the videos that we shown in between the different segments of these sessions, because there's a lot of different ways that even outside of these smaller bite-sized demos that we can collaborate and help you not only understand the product better, but also help with the adoption of products within your organizations.
Let me take a little bit of a different approach on it too. Totally agree with everything that was just shared, but I want to share maybe what not to do because I think that's what leads to poor adoption sometimes. The two things not to do are don't turn it on and expect people to self-adopt, right? You're gonna need to pull them along. You need a plan, you need a strategy for adoption, training, all of those things, which goes to what both Prachi and Jordan just said. The other thing is don't do it all at once, right? Do not do fire hydrant training because look, the people you want to be using this, they are excellent at their job because they are people first people, but they are not technology first people, right? So a lot of people coming to sessions like this, we love the technology. It's really cool. We just want to kind of consume it all at once, but that's overwhelming for them. So Prachi kind of shared a couple of really good low-hanging fruit, quick win scenarios. So start with a few of those, right? Give them something that they can go, wow, the light bulb just went on. This changed my life over just a couple of weeks. Now I'm ready to consume the next piece instead of giving them 10 things and then they actually don't do any because it's too overwhelming.
I think that's great advice, not just throwing it out and then hoping people pick it up. One question that comes to mind on the topic of adoption and change management is the new versus old outlook. We have some other questions coming through, but because we're talking about user adoption, quick question there about Outlook and what you guys have to say about it.
Well, I'm biased because I actually love the new Outlook and I do recommend, as someone who works at Microsoft, it's always good to adopt new technology whenever you get access so that when the older version is sunsetted, you have enough ramp time to get used to it. Me personally, I really struggle with change. So the sooner I can get it over with, the better. And that's why I personally recommend switching to the new Outlook if you can. But for Copilot for Sales, it works with both versions. So, if you're on either, it's good. But in the future, it's always just good to switch to newer technology when you can.
And I would add to that there are subtle differences, right? So even in the videos, if you're watching closely, you might have seen, wait, that's the old Outlook and that's a new Outlook, because there are some things in old Outlook that work a little different. Some things actually work with Copilot, like a summary of a meeting. I didn't see that lit up in my new Outlook right now, right? So for me, I'm kind of a tech first person. I struggle with adoption too, but at the same time, I don't mind bouncing around to both of them. I would certainly not say tell your sellers that they should use both. You probably need to decide on one, but understand what you're dealing with. So love the idea of adopt the new one because it's going to replace the old one eventually too. But for goodness sakes, don't train your people on something they can't do in it yet, because that's gonna frustrate them, right? So be aware of what you're doing. Do something as a team, or at least as an intact pilot group, so you don't have 3 different people working on 2 different versions of the truth, creating a lot of conflict. They both have their own place in getting things done. Make a good, intelligent decision about it before you move forward with it, and then be consistent with it.
And I'll say on the difference between new and old versions, from my time working directly at Microsoft, they do take feedback around their tools quite seriously when it is being submitted. So if you were used to a feature and dependent on a feature in an older version of one of the products and don't see that in the new ones, there's always a place within the apps that you can submit that feedback, say, I really need this feature and I really hope it's in the new version, and would also highly just recommend working that in if you do see some features that you need and don't see and are struggling in a new version of something as you're making that transition over.
Great. So we had another question come in from Amber Lee saying some of our users aren't able to see the AI notes from a recorded meeting. Any advice you can give on how to fix this?
Yeah, I think, Amber, that's a great question. I'm going to send you a link on a step-by-step of how to turn on the features, making sure you have the right license so that when you have Copilot for Sales, like Jeff showed you, it's recording the meeting and it's assigned to a CRM record. So let me just send you a link in the chat, and that'll help you figure out a step-by-step on how to ensure it's working.
And Amber, one thing I've noticed on my end, and we're all learning together, right? So I don't know if this is the right answer or not, but I've noticed that the notes, it's got that little tab that says AI notes or AI generated notes or something like that. When it does the meeting summary initially, a lot of times that isn't filled in. That takes a little longer to populate than the other pieces of it. So if you're coming back, an hour or a day later, you might see that that's getting updated. I'd encourage you to go look at your old Copilot feed in Teams and see if some of those ones where you didn't see it from a few days ago, if it's now showing up there. And what you can do is if you look at that and go, but I need it faster, I actually need these notes right now, you can turn on Copilot in there. If you look at that video that I played looking at my notes from a meeting last week, there's a Copilot button in there too. You can still interact with the transcript. So you can hit that button and you can say, give me the meeting notes, give me the meeting recap, ask it some questions, and it will do that live for you right there. So that's what I'm using right now until those meeting notes speed catches up with what I'm doing with Copilot.
When it comes to meeting notes, I think for a lot of people, I know me, when I'm in a meeting, it's helpful to take notes to stay engaged and to remember the things that we're talking about. So what do you have to say about sellers who are really attached to taking notes versus using Copilot? Would Copilot really be able to replace their note-taking skills? Or, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd like to take a shot at this one because I am an avid note taker. And so this was moving my cheese, if you're familiar with that expression. This is a lot of change for me that I was like, whoa, I don't know about this. And someone actually asked me this question a week or two ago in a meeting saying, hey, note taking is a really good thing and it helps retain stuff up here. So first of all, I would say if you're used to taking notes, I would not discourage you from continuing to take notes. Still use Copilot, still let it transcribe, still be able to go back to that. And if you always find value in continuing to take notes, please, by all means, continue to take notes. And it's kind of cool because if you take those notes into something like Dynamics or OneNote, well, Copilot's in there too. And it's actually accessing those notes and helping you to do some pretty incredible things with it. I found that if I'm taking tons of detailed notes, sometimes it can actually summarize those for me faster than I can summarize them for myself. So that's all upside. But what I've also found out is, as someone who's an avid note taker, but as someone who sometimes has a calendar that looks like the one you just saw there, I just can't get them all in fast enough. Sometimes I just need to show up to a meeting and I barely have time to even scratch any notes. I need to be very deeply engaged. And this is my partner taking notes for me. And it is a huge not just time saver, but just quality saver. I mean, the scenario I shared where I looked at the previous week's notes, that was a real scenario where I was able to go in and go, I had a lot of meetings last week. I'm not quite sure what happened. This is when I had like 5 bullets in a OneNote somewhere and it just didn't fully capture everything. I asked Copilot for help and it was like, oh yeah, that's what happened in this meeting. So definitely use both until you feel like, okay, I either don't need to take notes anymore, or maybe note taking is selectively applied when you have that really strategic meeting and you need to capture those notes so that you remember it.
We'll say too, one, I agree with Jeff that I'm very much a proponent of note taking myself. But I think when looking at the features that Copilot offers inside of meetings, it isn't just about the summarization or the note taking, but I think also after the fact, the ability to interact with that transcript and the summaries in ways that you might not be able to with your normal notes. So if you took handwritten notes or typed notes through an entire 2-hour meeting, that's really great. You have all that content. But if you have the transcription turned on, you can then go and ask Copilot questions about that in a way that is just going to provide you information and give you answers a lot quicker than maybe having to go through all of your notes and scan for individual lines or items or go-tos that were brought up. So even if you are doing the handwritten note, you can still find quite a bit of use in at least making sure Copilot is turned on and catching some of that in the background for you.
Yeah, and to add to that, I like that it takes away that burden of having to remember minor details, especially as a seller with a calendar as crazy as Jeff was showing you. It can be hard to even catch a breath or get a sip of water in between, right? So your Copilot is going to keep you organized because as soon as the meeting ends, you get a small Teams message saying, hey, your Copilot summary is ready. So instead of having to manually go into my folder and organize my notes the way I used to, Copilot is automatically taking my notes and helping me stay organized. So I know naturally I try to be organized, but sometimes I'm not very organized. And oh, where did I save that note, or where can I find that information? But with Copilot summaries, it automatically populates as a separate chat in your Teams where you have most of your time doing productivity. So that's personally what I really love about it. And to mention, Copilot, it doesn't replace human expertise. It only amplifies human expertise. So because I have that burden of taking manual notes off of me, I'm able to meet more often and sell more often. So it's a really great way to look at it as well.
I think that is a great way to look at it. Again, it's called Copilot for a reason. You are the pilot. It is your Copilot. It is on the passenger seat, just helping you navigate. One thing that I saw come through from Manuel, it wasn't necessarily a question, but I thought of a question as I read his comments about talking to leadership about AI. Maybe you're in this meeting, this conversation, you're watching webinars, you're seeing the value of Copilot, you're looking at it, you're using it, there's ROI there, and you're having a hard time with leadership adoption and leadership being on board with it. So do you guys have recommendations or ways that people who might not have the most kind of authority in the organization to make that call, but influence at least the organization to start considering Copilot AI and adopting those technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question we often get from C-suite executives we present to on Copilot because, hey, there's a new shiny tool, but how do we know people are going to adopt it? And as Jeff and Jordan mentioned, you have to be intentional about the way you roll it out, the way you roadmap it. But also, we have tools in place with Copilot to help make that smoother. There's a Copilot adoption dashboard that gives sales leaders the insight into who's adopting what feature and what can we do to improve adoption. Even internally at Microsoft, we had our leadership create like a around the world with Copilot in 360 days, where if you created a task with Copilot, you get a little check mark and your manager gets, that award that, hey, this person has 100% Copilot adoption. So we've gamified it and incentivized it that way. But the great thing is leaders get out of the box with Copilot adoption and readiness dashboards that they'll be able to leverage as they continue to adopt Copilot across the board.
And look, leaders are cynical, right? They have been hearing sales pitches for their entire career. They figured out how to, stay until they're ready to go and go when they're ready to go. And they've heard a lot of pitches about things they've spent money on that wound up not getting used. So they look at everything with I need more evidence. I need this to be something that I've decided is a priority. So a couple of low depth probe ways of doing it, right? Piloting Copilot ways of doing it are, can you get just a couple of people, right? You can buy individual Copilot licenses right now, right? So can you get a couple of people to use it who have a trusted ear of that leader to say, look, I'm using it. This was a very small commitment for me to play with it. And here's the value I'm getting out of it. I guarantee you, if you're having regular meetings and you're sending regular emails and you just take advantage of those two capabilities, you will probably say, the monthly spend on Copilot is justified by day 3 to 5 of every month. I mean, it's amazing all the value you get out of doing those things regularly. Even better, if you've got an engaged leader that's willing to experiment with it, the leader may not be directly customer facing, but remember, there's Microsoft 365 Copilot that can be used for everything from researching internal questions to even drafting internal communications. Get someone to partner with them, right? Harvard Business Review says leaders who are getting the most out of technology actually have a digital coach who's helping them to get a vision and spread that vision across the company. Get your leader a digital coach if they're open to that. You may not want to title that person that, but to actually help them directly get value out of something. Because once they catch that vision, they will say, our team needs this, or we're going to be slipping behind.
Will say too, the adoption landing page that Prachi mentioned, I put that in the Q&A, the link to it. So if you wanted to check it out, there's some really great information in there, and there shows information broken down by who you need to help with the adoption process. So whether it's leadership, direct users, or just going over technical readiness, that's all linked directly in there. So whether or not you're handling those conversations yourself, or like Jeff mentioned, you're kind of having some sort of partner coming in to help with those convos, Microsoft has provided a lot of direct information to try to make those conversations a little easier on you guys.
By the way, one other thing to think about on there, and you've seen it in the little video ads we've been playing, but a great way to get leaders engaged and bought in is to get them where you can get their undivided attention for a little while. At the bottom of the slide that's displaying right now, you see Join Us in Denver and that link. Go check out that link. This is an event done as a partnership between Microsoft and C5 Insight and Dynamics Con Live, and it is just strategic, visionary leadership content around how to help give leaders vision and plans for getting the most out of these technology investments with a strong focus on Copilot. So if you can talk some of those decision makers and influencers into coming to that event, I guarantee you they'll go home saying that was a day and a half well spent.
I'm going to go ahead and post that link here in the Q&A. Jeff also posted in the Q&A, if you guys are in there at all, he wants to know if you guys want him to play that video that he skipped early on. So if you want to give that a thumbs up, if you're interested in seeing another quick demo, let me know and we will pivot. Lindsay also said something really helpful on the topic of leadership being on board with this conversation about AI, Copilot, new technology. She said that the average productivity increase is 3%. That's something that she's seen. There is Microsoft documentation as well about how many hours you can save with Copilot, even just within your email. I think we covered that the first week on our email efficiency video, and 8.8 hours are spent every week in your inbox for power users, like people who are always kind of in their inboxes like salespeople. So the ROI is definitely there. It's just kind of consolidating it and using some Microsoft documentation, case studies, talking to a partner who can help you develop a pitch to your leadership team about why this would be helpful for the organization are great ways to present that info. So let's see here. We have been talking about Cadence in this webinar, and maybe sales teams aren't following a Cadence, or their managers said you should follow a Cadence, but don't know if they actually are. What other ways can Dynamics 365 Sales or Copilot help with that regular cadence for daily, weekly meetings for salespeople?
Yeah, I can take this one, and I think I'll do a little visual with sharing my demo environment. So let me just quickly get that shared. So as we talk about Cadence, I know whenever I need to meet with my manager, I have so many different opportunities going on. So it can be hard to figure out, hey, what do I need to remember as I have this cadence? And what I love is, as Jeff had showed you earlier, now Copilot gives you key highlights directly in Dynamics. So instead of having to manually read through every single email meeting or note in the timeline section, my Copilot gives me the key highlights that I can copy into my notes before my cadence. I can even ping this to my manager before our meeting as well, or during it even. And on the right-hand side, we can also ask our Copilot to show my pipeline. So as we have our weekly meetings to discuss some of my key opportunities, my Copilot pulls all of the key opportunities that I currently have in my pipe. And I can even ask for a summary. So I forgot what this one's about with a datum. Let's summarize this. And directly in my flow, Copilot gives me a summary that I can be armed with as I go into that cadence. So again, as you can see, Copilot is here to help make your life way more efficient as a seller so that you don't have to stress as much for your cadence meetings. But yeah, that's what I wanted to show.
Thanks, Prachi.
I think when it comes to cadence too, we've obviously been talking quite a bit about dynamics sales since Copilot for Sales has been the point of this series. But especially as Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365 users, there's a lot within those platforms that can easily aid your sales cadence, and that has Copilot integration enhancing that as well. I know internally with C5, we've had presentations before and have done workshops around things like the Viva platform and tools within there that help establish and build cadences for you, give you recommendations on how to set up your schedule and your week to make sure you have a work-life balance around that sales cadence. And that's also getting a lot of Copilot features getting brought into it as well. So as you dig deeper and get more involved with these tools, I think you'll start to see that across the many products that Microsoft makes, there's a lot in there that can aid you with the addition of Copilot and that sales process lens over it all.
And remember that cadence is kind of about having a proactive disposition, right? And it's very easy for us as human beings to get comfortable being reactive. So part of it is it's training, it's repetition, it's accountability, it's visibility, right? Copilot, Dynamics, Teams, all of those can be tools in the toolbox that can help those sellers and other people engage with customers to establish a cadence and become more proactive. But at the end of the day, it's only as good as people actually using the tools in the toolbox. So you need to make sure you're putting processes and programs and training and repetition in place to help create a proactive disposition among your people. And frankly, I look at it as it's almost a corporate obligation now, because what's going to differentiate us humans from the ability to automate things more and more in the future is not reacting to what's going on around us, but it's actually being proactive. So you are serving your people by helping them to get a vision for becoming a more proactive human being. That's going to help them to stay ahead of all this change that's going on around us all the time.
I think on that note, we are going to close. Having that kind of in our future, there's so many different things changing, making sure that we're not putting too much on our plate all at one time. I know that Manuel also was asking about when something would be available in Copilot, like that video you showed. Microsoft has documentation on road mapping, and we can also make sure that we include that. If you have more questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask or it comes to mind later, we do have an FAQ blog where we've compiled the answers to all of the questions that we've talked about live. And we do have a playlist on YouTube with all of this previous content if you haven't been able to make a previous session.
Okay, so I have to play this video because we had multiple people participate, and I need to play it to make me feel good about what they did. So I'm going to play that, and then we'll play our exit video.
Okay.
I'm in a meeting with an important group of prospects. We're having a long and detailed conversation about our Luck 365 plan. It's a support plan that they need in order to get the most out of their Dynamics 365, Microsoft 365, and Power Platform investments. I want to be sure I'm addressing a question to the right person, and I've lost track of who all is in this meeting. So I asked Copilot for help. Not only does it tell me who is in the meeting based on their team's login, but it also captured the information each person shared when they introduced themselves. And it gives me a quick summary of each stakeholder on the call. Later in the meeting, I want to get one of the senior decision makers re-engaged. She's the chief financial officer. So I asked Copilot for some help on questions that might help engage her in the conversation. Copilot isn't just valuable for taking meeting notes, it's your sales partner in helping you even during the meeting itself. If you look at those questions, they were very cool, insightful questions it gave, and it was based on the context of the conversation. So it really can help you. It helps me as a seller every day. All right.
Thanks everybody for joining us. We hope to see you next week.